This is Life Changes with Filippo, with unforgettable, ever insightful conversations that captivate. Conversation that matters as we, as one, strive for higher planes of existence and a better understanding of our true selves and the world in which we live, always remembering life changes. This is radio like you've never felt before, with tonight's guest, the founder and chairman of Sports Immortals, Joel Platt. And now your host, our MC, the master of change, Filippo Voltaggio.
I am so excited about tonight's show, and I am so grateful to our producer, Mark Lejour, for our guest, Joel Platt. Joel represents a sector of humanity, of life, of triumph, something that I have never gotten to experience to the fullest that I personally maybe even could have. And so I'm glad that we're going to be having this conversation today, and I hope it's the first of many for us here at Life Changes with Filippo, and also for many of you listening in to engage more in exactly what we're going to be talking about for the betterment of all of us. Let me explain myself. It's not coincidental that just less than a half hour ago, I got home in time to do, or got back into town in time to do this very show. Where have I been? I have been in my hometown performing. I sang in the town where I was born and raised. Now, how does this play into what we're going to be talking about today? Well, let me tell you. After I performed in my hometown, I got a standing ovation, which was very heartwarming and very touching. And as heartwarming and touching as it wasn't until one man in particular came up to me and gave me a big hug, and with a big smile on his face, he asked me if I remembered him. And I could tell he wanted me to remember him because he was proud of me, and he wanted to let me know that he remembered me. And I have to say, it was quite an interesting moment. Let's put it this way. Let me go back a couple years ago. As I bring this story all together, I was throwing the ball with my nephew who loves baseball. And as I was throwing the ball, he said, "Wow, you throw far. Wow, you're really good at this. I didn't know you were so good at this." And without thinking, I said, "Neither did I." And then my brother took his kids to a baseball game and invited me. And I went. And I was having so much fun, and my brother said, "I didn't think you'd have this much fun at a baseball game." And I said, "Neither did I." And I had a lot of fun. And I couldn't wait to go again and again. And it's interesting that my introduction to sports came in maybe a way that maybe a lot of kids got introduced to sports. I did not come from a sports family. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I had ever seen a baseball. We didn't have a TV when I was a kid. And we didn't have any friends because where we moved, there were no kids in the area that we knew of until we went to kindergarten. So we didn't know any kids around. So I did not see a baseball or a football or a basketball or a soccer ball until I got to school. And I was happy to see them. They looked fun and they looked exciting. And I couldn't wait to play. And so I remember on the first or second day of school when we went out to play sports I guess I was in first grade at this point, I was put a bat was put into my hand, and we were told that we were going to play baseball, something I knew nothing about, but I was eager to learn, though a little afraid because I'd never tried it before. And a bat was put in my hand, and I was led into a swing. I was shown how to do a swing once. And then a ball was thrown at me as far as I was concerned. And I didn't know what to do. And I guess I tried to swing, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember exactly, I missed the ball every single time. So I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know how to do it, and nobody showed me how. And in this particular field of life, activity, I didn't have the initiative to go and learn on my own or find people that could teach me, and it certainly wasn't my father or any family member, so I never learned. So I became one of these kids who did not know how to play. I thought I was not coordinated enough, and I thought I was what all the other kids said I was. And you can imagine. And I was the person that was picked, the boy that was picked last on the teams, and people would complain when I was on their team. And you know what? On the one hand, I don't blame them. By the time I got to high school, I still hadn't learned. I still wasn't taught, and it was something that just, it was a sore thing for me. And I did everything I could to get out of PE so that I wouldn't have to play and be teased, because I just wasn't good at it, and I hated sports. At least so I thought. So I excelled instead in music, and I put hours into playing the piano and into singing and doing shows and all of that. And I continued to excel in that. Little did I know that sports and music could go together really beautifully. But in music, for some reason, I was trained. My parents did get me piano lessons. My dad did teach me how to sing, and he taught me songs, and he taught me how to perform, and I excelled. By the time I got to high school, I was awful in sports, but I was the lead in a lot of all the musicals and leading the national anthem and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, there was one man who I respected, who was frustrated by me and didn't know what to do with me. And at one point, in just exhaustion, he just kind of said, like, just go away, because I couldn't play sports. And that always stuck with me, that I frustrated this man who I could tell really wished I could have done something to show him I could do something. Well, when I sang this weekend, that man, my coach from high school, was in the audience, cheering me on, giving me a standing ovation, and telling me that he has bought my CDs and listens to them and enjoys them, and wanted to make sure that I knew who he was, because he wanted me to know he was proud of me. And, you know, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm really glad. And yet, I think I still could have excelled in sports, and I don't think it's too late. And so, for that reason, I'm excited about this show, because with my nephew and my nieces, I am starting to get into sports and learning while watching them learn. And we're learning together, me as a child, right along with them, because I think it's something really important. And what Joel Platt is doing, I think, is important, not just for him, but what he's doing for the memory of people that have gone before us, and for those of us who, whether we're passionate about it and know we are, or we're not, but will become so when we see the triumphs that he brings forward in the stories and the memorabilia that he has in Sports Immortals. And I can't wait to share his story with all of you right after this.
Clean water is not enough. Reverse osmosis, distilled water, and most bottled waters are devoid of naturally occurring minerals. They are acidic, unstructured, and hard to absorb, and rob minerals from the body. Ionways ionizers produce a super abundant supply of powerful antioxidants in each glass. Ionized water has a reduced molecular cluster size and a negative charge, hydrating you up to 6 times better. Water from an Ionways ionizer will help you restore your body to its natural pH balance, boosting your vitality. And ionized water more effectively flushes acidic toxins from within your body. Drink the healthiest water available today. Ionways Water Systems, their water changes everything. To learn more about Ionways Water Systems and how you can own one today, visit our website at lifechangeswithfilippo.com and click on our sponsor page. You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with your host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can visit us online via Twitter and Facebook and at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.
We're back, and I'm so excited to be introducing this man on our show here today. He is Joel Pratt, and he is the chairman of Sports Immortals. Now, after graduating from Duquesne University in 1959, Mr. Platt became a successful business entrepreneur, excelling in the areas of commercial real estate, merchandise sales, and amusement attractions. His sports memorabilia collection has been featured in Sports Illustrated, Sports Magazine, and numerous periodicals and national television features. The Smithsonian Institute has recognized the collection as, quote, absolutely the most outstanding collection on all sports, end quote. With over 50 years of experience, Mr. Platt is a renowned authority in the field of sports collecting. He is a consultant, an appraiser, and a historian. In May of 2009, Mr. Platt was enshrined into the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame of Western Pennsylvania. And later this month, him and his sports memorabilia will be featured on Discovery Channel's Velocity Channel's show, $1 Million Collection. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. In the meantime, we're happy to have Mr. Joel Platt on the show. Welcome, Joel.
Welcome. It's an honor to be with you.
The honor is mine, and as you heard from the beginning of the show, I'm so grateful for what you're doing, because those of us who missed some of these experiences will get to experience them through what you have done. Now, you have come to this through many experiences of your own, which are fascinating and tragic at the same time. I have called this show, quote, through the tragedy of one child is born the mission of a man and the triumph of humanity through Sports Immortals. Please tell me about that tragedy that you described to me when we spoke.
Well, let me say first, out of tragedy comes opportunity if the person picks up the ball and takes it. My story
Indeed.
began in 1943. I was 4 years old, injured in a gasoline explosion. I was bedridden for over a year. To entertain me during this convalescent period, my parents started buying me baseball cards. My favorite card was Babe Ruth, and one night I had a dream that the Babe visited me in the dream and said, "Kid, don't give up. You can get better and someday be a Major League Baseball player or build a museum for sports heroes." I set my life out on that two-pronged journey. Became an outstanding shortstop playing in college at Duquesne University. I was about to sign with the Boston Red Sox when I injured my arm, so that major league dream went out the window, though I played for several prominent softball teams after that. But I never lost sight of my other dream, and that was to build the National Museum of Sports for this country and International Hall of Fame. And set my journey out 1 million miles to curate over 1 million mementos. So over a 50-year period, I've met all the greats, their widows, or their relatives to curate the largest and most valuable collection of sports mementos in the world. We call it the crown jewels of sports collectibles. And we have a showcase museum in Boca Raton, Florida. Anybody visiting South Florida is able to have a traumatic and interesting experience as they go through our showcase museum. but it's the forerunner for us to develop the premier museum on sports in the world, a Smithsonian on sports that we call the National Museum of Sports and International Hall of Fame that will honor and enshrine the greatest athletes in sports history.
Joel, you know, some of this memorabilia is really personal, as I've been told by you and by producer Mark, really personal to the players, and they are things that people don't normally give up, but and let go of, or allow in collections like this. There's something about the way you're going about it, or the passion behind it, that is making people want to give you or put into your care these pieces. Tell us about that, please.
Well, it's I think it's kind of been a God-given mission to develop an inspirational project that will benefit mankind. Our National Museum Project, as I call it, will be educational, cultural, historical, and you will evolve from 80 A.D., the Roman Colosseum, through each decade, where you'll hear the music and sounds of the times, see the sight of the times, and see the greatest athletes come to life through animation, audiotronics, holograms, and the latest technology. So creating a inspiration attraction and as well, and most of all, entertaining. But, you know, I've always felt in my travels, when people heard my story, felt the passion, that they could feel my sincerity and have been most obliging. And it's always been the mission to develop this museum that would be an inspiration and educational attraction to mankind. And where would be a better place to have your family treasures on sports displayed than in the National Museum Sports Immortals?
You know, Joel, when I was listening and watching the video that you have up on the website at sportsimmortals.com, for any of you who are interested in learning more, it was interesting that to me that the passion came through. It's just like, it was heartfelt. It wasn't, oh, just come and see all the stuff that we got. It was really about triumph and about passion and about victory. And like you said, out of tragedy can come opportunity. And something that I know that you're really proud of is the Jim Thorpe collection. And I understand that was really difficult to get, and also very special. Can you talk about that collection, please?
Well, I visited Jim Thorpe's third wife, and this was about the 10th trip, in which I was trying to locate some of Jim's mementos. I located Patricia Thorpe living in Cabazon, California. She was in a trailer taking care of unfortunates that might have been alcoholics or on drugs, and she welcomed me in. I came unannounced, knocked on the door, introduced myself, and told her my story. And, you know, she showed me a lot of Jim's things, his Indian clothes, his football uniforms from Carlisle. And over a 5-year period, I corresponded with her, called her numerous times every year. And 5 years later, out of the blue, I received a telegram that said, am confined to bed, want you to have all of Jim's things for the Sports Immortals Museum. And this included all of his football uniforms, his football helmet, medals, trophies, his Indian clothes, his Olympic scrapbook with letters from President Taft congratulating him on his victories in Stockholm, in the decathlon and pentathlon in 1912 in Stockholm, and also a big scrapbook that he kept himself. It was about, I'd say about 18 inches thick, of his whole career, with his baseball career, his football career,
wow,
as well as his track career.
Yeah,
but, you know, that's only one story that can be found in our book, Sports Immortals, Stories of Inspiration and Achievement. It's featured on our website at www.sportsimmortals.com. And as well as, these are exciting times for us at Sports Immortals. We just received a script for a movie on my life story of A Million Mouths, the Joel Platt story, and Discovery Channel feature that'll be on April 10th at 8:30 on the Velocity Channel. And we're also launching a traveling exhibition that'll be touring major museums and sports events. It's a customized 18-wheelers that are absolutely beautiful, and that'll be going out for sponsorship soon.
Joel, there's something about sports that touches so many hearts, and it like music. Actually, you don't need words, and it's a language that everybody can understand internationally. So this is exciting. Tell me why, in your words, after having been so passionate and so involved in the lives of so many athletes, from knowing their stories and then some of them even personally. Tell me about sports and humanity in your words, if you could, Joel.
Well, before I answer that question, let me say, I kind of was the antithesis of you growing up in school, because I was the last one to get up and sing in music. I was the first one to be picked on all the sports teams. So you were vice versa. As I was hearing your story, I was thinking back to my younger days and saying, where he was the first, I was the last, and where I was the first, you were the last.
Wow! But, just healed my heart, Joel.
To answer your question, is the great equalizer. It crosses borders, it crosses countries, and it really is the element that I think brings everything together. But in our Sports Immortals big attraction, as I call it, the National Museum and International Hall of Fame, that will honor and enshrine the greatest athletes in sports history. And our goal is to make enshrinement as a Sports Immortal the greatest honor achievable in sports, taking it above any existing Hall of Fame. To be enshrined as a Sports Immortal is almost like being knighted, per se. But we want to incorporate the element of music with sports, because as you go through each decade, you'll be hearing the sounds of the times and seeing the cultural aspects of what was going on in history and the economy and the world as these particular athletes were excelling. For example, as you go through the 20s, you'd be hearing Roaring 20 music and a vaudeville type of atmosphere, and the surroundings would be, Babe Ruth coming to life for baseball, and Newt Rockne giving his famous halftime speech for football, Gene Tunney, Jack Dempsey fight scene, Bobby Jones for golf, and Bill Tilden for tennis. But creating this atmosphere of what was going on in the world in each decade, so there's something there for everybody. Even if they didn't like sports, they'd be captured by the music of the various times and time periods, in the history and cultural educational aspect, where all the school kids from all the different schools would tour the museum as part of their educational process, etc.
Joel, so much of sports seems to focus on competition between others, athletes or other teams. And yet, so far, from what I saw on the video and everything that we've spoken about, both in our previous conversation and now on the air, it's really about the personal triumphs and the personal goals. Not that it's not about competition, but talk to me a little bit about that, the personal achievements.
Well, again, it's the inspirational aspects of reliving the life story of athletes and how they overcame or achieved and became great as Sports Immortals per se. But it's something everybody in their life runs into difficult pitfalls, so to speak, and it's the person that can overachieve and pick themselves up off the floor. I always like to use Joe Louis as an example, he was knocked down in almost every one of his fights, but he'd get up and wind up winning every fight just about and knocking out his opponent. So, it's not feeling sorry for yourself, because nobody goes through life unscathed, and you've got to be able to overcome and get back up and achieve your goals.
Yeah, actually, and that is such a powerful message for everybody in all walks of life, and no matter what they're doing. And sports has a way of illustrating that really beautifully, especially when you're able to see some clips over the years of different athletes and what they've done. And the Olympics does a good job of sharing people's stories leading up to the Olympics and their wins or their triumphs or quote unquote failures, which, not necessarily is that the best word, right, Joel?
That's true, and I like to use an example. There is I'm friendly with Kathy Order, Al Order's wife, and she recently gave me his Olympic jacket and a discus that he had used in setting a record in the Olympic Games. And Al Order is one of the greatest Olympic champions. He won 4 gold medals in 4 different Olympic Games, and she was telling me each time he barely made the team. And he was like the last one picked each year, but he just rose to the occasion when it came to the big event in the Olympics, and he won 4 straight Olympic gold medals in the discus.
Well,
so it just depends the drive in each individual. If they could, just harness what's inside everybody and their will to achieve and rise to the occasion. And there's so many stories, regarding, sports greats and how they overcame and became champions.
This is, I couldn't agree more. And actually, one of my favorite interviews so far is with Mo Green, who won several gold medals in a couple Olympics, actually. And just when I was ignorant of the sport that he ran in, I didn't realize that it only lasted a few seconds, and then he got his gold medal. But in order for those few seconds to happen, because he was just that fast, I think it was the 100 meter. But in order for those few seconds to happen, went hours and days and years of practice and of self-talk and right, Joel?
That's it. I'd like to share maybe with your guests, in our book, Sports Immortals, Stories of Inspiration and Achievement. It's something, for example, when we did our book, and it has over 500 glorious colored photos of some of the great items in the collection. But when we wrote the book, with Triumph Publishing Company, I became friendly, with the head of the company, the president of the company, and he said, Joel, if you sell 10,000 copies of a book, it's considered good, excellent. And I'm proud to say that we've sold over 150,000 copies of the book, and it's been, a big success, and I recommend it to all the listeners, as well as I just signed agreements with Lou Aronica, who's a New York Times best-selling author, who's also doing another book, a different type of book, kind of on my memoirs with all the different stories that in my encounters of 1,000,000 miles to curate 1,000,000 mementos, and along with all the pitfalls, that happened to me along the way, and experiencing, both triumph and tragedies, etc. But if I can share a few stories with you in my 1,000,000 miles of travels, I might say I've met many great athletes, and but the greatest to me was Muhammad Ali. I met him on 6 different occasions, and every time was an experience that I'll remember. Just the nicest individual, and and met him the first time in Miami. He was training for his fight with Sonny Liston, and I was actually the night before in a closed circuit television of a Dick Tiger championship fight, sitting next to Angelo Dundee, and we got talking, and he invited me down to the gym, the Fifth Street Gym in Miami, and came down there the next morning, though I was headed to New York for some meetings, and I had to get a 12 o'clock plane. But at 8 o'clock, I was down there waiting for Ollie. He was running to the gym, and sure enough, caught up with him about 8:30. Invited me up to his dressing room, and I said to him, "Champ, my dad has seen all the greats. He's a great boxing historian. He thinks you and Jack Johnson are the greatest." He jumped off his bench and yelled to his trainer, Boudini, "Open up the trunks, give my friend Joel anything he wants." And he gave me his training suit for the Liston fight, and his gloves and shoes, and it's just about anything I wanted. Then years later, we were making up a wax figure of Ali, and I caught up with him at his training camp in Deer Lakes, PA, and I kind of popped in just as he was heading out with his wife, Veronica, for a press conference down in Washington, and he saw me, and by this time, every time he'd see me, he'd call me, "My man, the museum man." So I said, "Champ, listen, we're making a wax figure of you. We need your robe, your trunks, your shoes, and your gloves." So he called over his PR man, Gene Kilroy, and he said, "Get my friend Joel, my robe, my trunks, my gloves, my shoes." So about 10 minutes later, I said, "Champ, you can't leave because I need you to sign everything and take some pictures so we can authenticate it." So Mr. Kilroy came back with everything but his robe. So Ollie says, "Where's the robe?" He says, "Champ, you only have the robe you're training with, and you wore that in your last fight." He said, "The man only asked for one robe. Get the robe for him." And then it goes on like this, and each time it was, it was the same. Now, another great story is with Satchel.
Wait, Joel, hold 1 second, because we have to break for a commercial break, but I do want to hear that story. Please don't forget which one it was. I just want to say one thing. I hope your stories are going to be part of Sports Immortals, the museum, and all of that. But I know that some of those stories are in the book, and the book is Sports Immortals, Stories of Inspiration and Achievement, and you can get those at www.sportsimmortals.com. And of course, you could be looking out for the Discovery Channel's new channel called Velocity Channel. Its show $1 Million Collection on April 10th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is going to have the episode with Sports Immortals, the Joel Platt story. So be looking for that as well. And we'll be right back with the man himself, Joel Platt, right after this.
Clean water is not enough. Reverse osmosis, distilled water, and most bottled waters are devoid of naturally occurring minerals. They are acidic, unstructured, and hard to absorb and rob minerals from the body. IonWay's ionizers produce a superabundant supply of powerful antioxidants in each glass. Ionized water has a reduced molecular cluster size and a negative charge, hydrating you up to 6 times better. Water from an IonWay's ionizer will help you restore your body to its natural pH balance, boosting your vitality. And ionized water more effectively flushes acidic toxins from within your body. Drink the healthiest water available today. IonWay's water systems, their water changes everything. To learn more about IonWay's water systems and how you can own one today, visit our website at lifechangeswithfilippo.com and click on our sponsor page. You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with our host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can hear tonight's show and all our past shows, which include luminaries such as David Wilcock, Mariel Hemingway, Georgios Tsoukalos, Marcy Shimoff, and Shadow Stevens on our archive page at our website at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.com. Remember, you can also connect with us via Twitter and Facebook, and now in our own community at lifechangesnetwork.com, where real people come together to share real life in real time. That's lifechangesnetwork.com.
We're back. I'm Filippo Voltaggio, and our guest today is Joel Platt, who is the chairman of the Sports Immortals, a museum, and so much more. The Smithsonian Institute has recognized the collection as, quote, absolutely the most outstanding collection on all sports. So here he is. He had a story for us at the beginning that we had to interrupt, but if you could please pick up, Joel, where you left off. Who are you going to tell us about?
One of my great trips, and there's been a lot of them, but was I was trying to get something from a tangible aspect, uniform, etc., from George Mikan, first great big man of basketball, and Satchel Paige, the ageless wonder from the Negro Leagues, and later in his career he played with the Cleveland Indians and ended with the St. Louis Browns. So I was determined to get something and contact them. I tried to get Satchel for like 3 months, was unsuccessful in getting him on the phone. Did catch up with George Mikan, and he was living in Minnesota. He was an attorney. Called him up, and I told him, George, who I was, and I'd hope to fly up there, meet with him, and like to get some mementos, for my Sports Immortals Museum project. So we scheduled a date 2 weeks later. I flew up to Minnesota, spent the day with him, and he told me all about his career, and I taped him, and at the end I said, George, I'd like to get something from you. So he went in his utility room, and he had this bag of uniforms, and he brought it out, and he said, Joel, here's 4 uniforms, an all-star uniform, and 2 of my Minneapolis Lakers uniforms, and my warm-up with Minneapolis Lakers, which was the forerunner of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Mm.
He said,
I didn't know that.
You want. So I wound up taking a couple uniforms, and got so excited that I headed to the airport to head back to Pittsburgh. I said, I'm going to try Satchel one more time, and I caught up with him in Kansas City. And Sat said, I just got back from spring training and walked in the door, so it was my lucky day. And I told him, Sat, I'd like to fly down to Kansas City and meet with you. Come on down. So I changed my ticket, flew down to Kansas City, and rented a car just like it was yesterday. I remember pulling up in front of his house. Satchel was about 6'2", and his wife was standing next to him. She was about 4'9". They welcomed me in, and we spent a delightful day. And I interviewed him and asked him, how he got his name Satchel. So he said, well, I used to pick up the Coca-Cola bottle caps for the Negro League team in Mobile, Alabama, and they couldn't pay me, so they used to give me the old bats and balls, and I'd put them in this big satchel. And when the team was out of town, I would go play with the kids, and when the kids see me coming, they'd say, oh, here comes Satchel. And mind you, if they didn't let me play the position I wanted to play, I'd pick up my satchel with the balls and bats, and they would have any, and I'd be off. See? So I continued the conversation and interview with Satchel, and I said, Satch, who were some of the great hitters you faced in your career? And he said, well, Ted Williams and Stan Musial were great, but the greatest hitter of all time was Josh Gibson, the great Negro League catcher with a Homestead Grays. He said, Josh and I used to be a battery mates in Puerto Rico, and he said one day Josh came out to the mound and he said, Satch, you're striking out all these bums, but one day I'm going to be against you. We'll see how good you really are. Sure enough, 2 years later, Josh was from Pittsburgh, and we were playing the East-West Negro League All-Star game in Pittsburgh, and eighth inning came, and my team's ahead, the West team 3-1. So I get the first 2 batters out. Now, mind you, I could hit a Coca-Cola bottle cap on every pitch. That's kind of control I had. I walk the next two batters on 8 pitches, and the fans are going crazy, and the umpire comes out to the mound, and there's everybody screaming, and I mosey up to Josh in the on-deck circle and say, oh, you remember in Puerto Rico when you came out to the mound and said, I'm striking out all these bums? He said, well, I walked those two batters to make you the winning run, and I know your mommy and your daddy and your kids are up in the stands. Let's see what you could do. He said, I went back to the mound. I threw 3 black beanies, which he called his fastball, by him. He said, he never picked up the bat off his shoulders. Go back to Pittsburgh and look it up, Joel.
Joel, I could listen to these stories all day, and one of these days, I hope I'll get to face to face. This is great stuff. I feel like a kid listening to this stuff for the first time, and I am. It's like a whole new world for me. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, we just have a couple more minutes left, but something came to mind that I thought you would be the perfect one to ask. Okay. Since you've interviewed so many greats and all, I for some reason this thought came to my mind. I remember being in New York at a master's class, and there was a famous comedian who was giving the master's class to those of us who were learning about performance and all of that. And somebody asked them how, and the comedian happened to be of Jewish descent, and somebody asked, how come all the great comedians are either black, Jewish, or New York Italians? And the comedian said, because we laugh not to cry, and out of and like you said, out of tragedy can come opportunity. So is there any correlation to the great sportsmen and women in the world?
I think there is. It's never give up. Because like I said at the beginning, everybody has to overcome, because nobody has a pure life of no obstacles getting in their way to success. So you just never can lose sight of your dreams and set goals and never give up. Get knocked down, but get up and continue on to your destiny. I might add that any listeners that have any rare mementos can always contact us, get an evaluation, and if they're worthy, we certainly be interested in obtaining them for the Sports Immortals Museum project.
I'm glad you said that.
Contact us through www.sportsimmortals.com.
Absolutely.
Or they could call the museum, and that telephone number is 561-997-2575. And I'll repeat that. That's 561-997-2575.
Joel, let's also remind everybody from your words about the book and the show coming up, and then the movie and the new book.
Absolutely, and that's Discovery Channel's Velocity program, $1 Million Collections, April 10th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which I guess would be 5:30 in the West Coast.
Indeed, Pacific Standard Time.
And look out for our new book by Lou Aronica, which will probably be out in about 6 months, and our traveling exhibitions as well. And love to see you down in South Florida in Boca Raton at our Sports Immortals Museum Showcase. People think that is the ninth wonder of the world, and that's only the beginning. I might add that we are in discussions for our big project in Washington, Philadelphia, and Chicago, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't consider other locations as well.
Well, you said that's only the beginning, and I'd just like to give a little teaser to our friends listening. Just off the top of your head, how many baseballs do you have in the collection?
There's over 6,000 autographed baseballs dating back to 1865. And, the beauty of the collection, it covers all sports, actual mementos used in record-setting events, uniforms. There's over 1,000 uniforms from all the greats. You can name thousands of game-used bats, gloves, programs, over 10,000 programs dating back to the 1860s. coins, stamps, dolls, games, everything you could think of pertaining to sports, posters, song sheet music. Anybody having any rare old things like that? There's over 1 million cards alone, including the great Hannes Wagner card, in the museum collection as well.
Wow. And anybody that wants to learn more, you can always go to sportsimmortals.com and take a few minutes and watch the video that's up on that website. It'll certainly set your heart on fire for those of you who are enthusiasts. And if you're not an enthusiast, you'll probably become one after watching that. If not already, after having heard Joel on the show today. Joel, it's been a pleasure and an honor, and I can't wait to meet you in person. Thank you for sharing your stories and your mission and passion with us.
And thank you very much.
My pleasure, and we'll be back with your friend and mine, Mark Lejour, when he and I share the producer's wrap and we talk about all the great things that that's been inspired by this conversation. We'll be back with the producer's wrap right after this.
Life Changes with Filippo is a premier radio show presented by Life Changes Network, which is a company whose team has dedicated their lives not only to positive change, but to helping others observe and embrace, honor, and even celebrate their own changes, thus enabling a more positive, inspired life and helping to create a more positive and inspired world. From everyday people to corporate giants, celebrities, and children, we are here to help and to serve. With heart and experience, we bring our message and positive intent into your home or corporate office, and even through appearances on your favorite shows. If you wish to learn more about Life Changes life coaching and a private consultation with one of us, corporate event appearances, or if you would like us to appear on your radio or TV shows, visit lifechangeswithfilippo.com and click on our representation page. You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with your host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can visit us online via Twitter and Facebook and at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.
We're back. I am Filippo.
This is Mark Lejour.
It sure is, and thank you so much for bringing Joel Platt to the show.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for that discussion. I think what is so exciting to me about this discussion is obviously Joel's and Jim Platt, his son, who's helping him with this project and with the grand vision. What's so important about what they've done is the integrity of their commitment, the integrity of their vision, the passion they have to make a difference in people's lives and to inspire children and adults as well. But beyond that, when you think of sports, take it outside the box for a minute. We're almost programmed. You think of sports and you immediately think what you've been packaged and sold. This league or that league, this conventional sport or that conventional sport. But strip the marketing off of it for a second, and sports is the very essence of who we are as physical beings. And you see that today in everything from wheelchair competitions, to all sorts of elements that are either individual sports or team sports. But think of the first moments that you can walk and then run, and how you start competing against your friends who can run faster.
Yeah.
When you have kids who can jump higher.
Yeah.
Those are sports. You're competing. It's the essence of being human. But now I'll take it a step further and turn the tables on you for a second.
Okay.
Because sports, in essence, is what? It's competition. Whether you're competing with yourself, trying to become better as an individual and bettering your time, whether it's an individual sport or whether you're part of a team, and then the whole story of camaraderie. But you don't think of yourself as an athlete.
No,
right?
Not at all.
How many times did you win the Sergio Franchi vocal competition?
Right. You're right. I won a lot of things, including spelling bees and decathlons.
Well, and the vocal competition is you were a singer, right?
Yeah.
And that took years and days of practice, right?
Yeah.
And it took a certain type of lung power, right? A certain type of proficiency.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not basketball per se, but when you look at the two, you're still competing.
it's still a physical activity that you had to master.
Mm. Mm.
So if I were to give my friends from Success Training Group a little shout out for their timeline therapy, I would turn around and compare that to this moment where you realize that you are an athlete, and you're an athlete that has excelled. And that's what brings it back around to what Sports Immortals is doing and makes it so beautiful, because sports is the essence of everything we do. And everybody has a story, whether they recognize it or not, that is momentous in their journey, in their life.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was so touching and healing and funny, actually, as well, when he said, "That's funny, all the things that you were first at, I was last at," and the vice versa. And never really thought about that, because in our town, in our school, that wasn't celebrated as much as the sports were. And I liked how I liked what he said, and I think, and like I said, there could have been a place for sports in my life, and I would have enjoyed that, and now I'm starting to enjoy that more.
Well, think of the discussion. There has been a place for sports in your life in a different way. It's obviously made an impact on you. Every one of those experiences, whether you were picked last or whether the coach hassled you or whatever the case may be, formed or had an impact on you. At the time, maybe a perceived negative impact, but those impacts led to what, encouraged you down the singing path, and continued you down the path that led you to this point. And now you're learning sports in a different way, in a more positive way. But the reality is, it still has affected your life.
It's interesting, and it goes back to what Joel said, never give up, and get up, and if you fall down, get up and do it again, or what have you. And I remember times when I wasn't doing well in sports made me want to practice the piano more, or sing a song in front of the school and have the school see that, hey, I could do this too, kind of thing. And I'd forgotten all about that, because you're right, it becomes a part of us. And look how important that sports is, and music is, and I love how he's bringing them together.
So I'll tell you a story. I've had as you know, and for our listeners, have had the good fortune of excelling in both music and in sports, and yet they played very different roles at very different ages, and were very profound. And there's a story behind that journey. But in pointing to what you just said, things happen at certain points of your lives for a reason. And there's moments where you're in the zone and you take that energy and that success to the next level, and it opens new doors. And there's moments when you're meant to be on a different path, and so a different experience is going to happen. And I had a moment my senior year of college football when I was really beginning to excel. I had actually come back to the team after leaving to start my own business, which was unusual my junior year. I had earned my way back up to a starting position. I had been recruited off of the college, the Division II team, to be running track against some of the fastest athletes in the country and nation at the time. And so I was pretty competitive. And the big breakout starting position that I had, that I was called onto the field, the very first play, I'll never forget it. It was a 50 jiggle, and I was a 10-yard run and across the middle. And I was so excited to be out there. I was so excited to have made it to that point. And I was already planning how I was getting to the end zone, and that ball hit me right in the chest and slipped right down and landed on the field. And
I thought this was a good story.
It shattered me for the moment.
Wow.
And it changed the timbre of everything I did from that point forward in sports. And I still had a crack at the pros, and I still had a lot of good things happen. But it absolutely defined a shift. It was a fork in the road where I wasn't necessarily meant to go that way. If I would have got the ball and I had, green field in front of me and I scored, and that set up more confidence and more use and everything else, that would have been a life path for me. I was not meant to go down that path. And so you wonder how things happen. And when, what Joel was saying about, he was excelling as a pitcher and tore his rotator cuff.
Right.
You know, those types of stories, right?
Right. So, but had he got on to do sports, he might not have done this.
Exactly.
And this is like obviously his mission.
So this is the point, and it's a tough story to tell because now you're balancing what you're here to do, what you're meant to do, the lessons you're supposed to learn, with what you desire along the way, or what you learn, or what you're trying to overcome. In terms of proving it to other people or becoming something that you've always dreamed of, as opposed to what you're envisioning. You know, there's just different parts of that story. So it goes back to the things that you experienced. If you had been picked first, maybe you wouldn't have been so committed to music. If you had made the teams, maybe you wouldn't have spent that time practicing and becoming somebody that could win the vocal competition 9 times, because you would have spent all that energy
13.
In sports. 13 times. 13, but who's counting?
You know, Mark, we only have a couple minutes left, but I would really love, someday we'll have to extend this conversation because it's so important, but can you share that you also have a piece in there, or we don't have time?
We'll leave that hanging for our listeners. I don't think we have time, but yes, there is a piece of memorabilia from me that is in the Sports Immortals collection, and we'll just say we'll wrap it by saying that it stands for all of us who have put our time in and done our best to excel, and kind of an everyman piece of memorabilia there.
That's awesome. God, I wish we could share that story. So, well, stay tuned. We'll have to share that some point. But in the meantime, we've shared a lot, and Joel shared so much of his passion and mission with us. And Mark, thank you again for bringing him to us. And here we go. Let's enjoy sports more. I'm excited. So with that, I am Filippo Voltaggio, and along with our producers, Dorothy Lee Donahue and Mark Lejeune, we thank you for being part of this show and part of the positive changes we love to see in the world. Ciao, everyone.
You have been listening to Life Changes with Filippo, with the Master of Change, Filippo Voltaggio. Listen live every Monday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the BBS Radio Network, and visit us online at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo. Today's show has been made possible in part by our sponsors, Ionways Water Systems, Change Your Water, Change Your Life, and Love and Miracles with Dorothy Lee Donahue. To learn more about them, visit the sponsor page of our website. Once again, join us here next week as we consciously explore and embrace the only constant, life changes. Now's the time.